Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, what are you going to do if you lose that great paying job? Or let's say you lose your pension because your company went bankrupt. Or let's say that the government decided that they're going to confiscate IRAs to pay for the government debt, a bail-in, if you will. Or let's just say that things continue to go along and we see the dollar continue to lose its value, or maybe that picks up and accelerates and goes to zero very rapidly. Well, those are all questions that our guest today, Rich Scheben, has asked, and he has looked at a way to get an answer for that, for himself and for you, a way to get self-sufficiency. We're going to talk to him about why you want that, as well as steps that he has taken, and his book that explains how to do it a little bit at a time. So joining us today is the author of One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. He went from a New York City sales rep to someone who is self-sufficient in Montana and off the grid. Thank you for joining us, Rich.
My pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
Now, I think it's a real interesting book, as I said in the introduction, as well as a documentary, but it's not a grand leap from going to New York to living off the grid in Montana. It was a series of steps, and each one of those steps really gets you freer. Tell people why you wanted to do this, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the hows in terms of the individual steps.
You bet. Well, you know, when I was forcefully retired from Big Pharma, I worked for GlaxoSmithKline and Merck, I realized that options, especially for the middle class, not just for me, was definitely waning, David. And when I give talks or I do other radio shows, I talk about the financial, economic, social, and political reasons why we need to be more self-sufficient. Because it's pretty obvious we're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided as Americans. And we've been drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness by letting the powers that be create a tiered system of different rules, laws, and accountability. So I asked myself, how can we control our own destiny as Americans? And I realized that you look at food production with GMO foods, you look at the cost and inflation of foods, you look at the fact that GMOs cause cancer, changes your DNA, creates organ failure. We're not getting the nutrition to build our immune systems. So food had a lot to do with it. And then I wanted a little bit of acreage to grow my own produce. I wanted to raise my own animals. And because we live off the grid, we harvest amperage and volts from a solar array. So I figured out that as Americans, I need, because I'm practicing what I preach and doing this lifestyle, I need to offer ideas and solutions so the average American can simplify their life.
People have lost the skills that we had 100 years ago, 200 years ago. They don't know how to do this. They are completely dependent upon not just the power grid, but the entire grid of jobs as well as food supply. That entire process is really set up to keep us dependent on it. And of course, we have the story of a family, a homeschool family in Kentucky that was living off the grid and did not have things like running water, just as you don't have running water. And of course, anybody looks at this documentary because you have a very nice house. There is no way that is much nicer than most of the houses that you'll see in urban areas by far. And yet, because they did not have city water, because they did not have a well, that's one of the key things that they mentioned about this Kentucky family, where they took away all 10 children from them, saying they lived in squalor, implying that they lived in squalor simply because they didn't have running water and a few other things like that.
Yeah, well, I find when I hire homeschool kids, their work ethic, their communication skills, their listening skills are so much better. And I'm not per se downing public school kids, because there's some really good ones with good work ethic, but the maturity of the homeschool kids, I find, is 10 to 1 better than the public school kids. In fact, I even have a little example in my book that I shared that homeschool children, because of their listening skills, I notice in life, through my personal observation, Dave, they're debt-free earlier in life than public school kids of their same peers.
You know, I think having homeschooled my kids, I think a lot of it has to do, Rich, with the fact that they're just talking to adults or talking to people of all ages. They're not rigorously age segregated, and they come in contact with people in a variety of different situations rather than being set down in a chair and told they have to shut up and just listen to somebody at the front of the class. So, I mean, just that part of it, I think, is very helpful. But let's talk about some of the different aspects that you've got in your book. Of course, you're talking about choosing your off-grid location, choosing and building your off-grid country home. In other words, types of houses that you would build. This is really kind of a step-by-step procedure that you outline in your book as well as in your documentary to help people to maybe, you know, they're not going to be able to do everything at once, but they can look at which aspects they can do. Maybe just gardening. They can start out with that and start to become a little bit more self-sufficient step by step.
Absolutely, David. I talk about this often on the radio or when I give a talk. Take baby steps. You don't have to jump into everything all at once, but you got to do a little reading. You got to do a little research. And I'm not saying that we're 100% self-sufficient. It's not like I drill my own oil and refine my own gasoline, but I'm probably 98% more self-sufficient than most Americans. And it's mostly because I enjoy nature. But you can do little baby steps like put some solar panels on your existing home. Maybe buy a generator and figure out how that works. Do raised bed gardenings. Folks, if you're in suburban America and you're raking leaves and if you're cutting grass, you can start the best compost pile in the world just with those and build your own soil. So you don't even have to live on a farm. There's a lot of fallacy about buying farmland. I do not have farmland here. I have mountainous land. I have lots of rock. I have glacial silt. I make my own soil we save every organic coffee ground. We save every radish top. We save every eggshell. And we put this in the compost pile with our goat manure and chicken manure, and we have the best compost in the world. So we make our own soil.
With your raised bed.
Ways to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I got the DVD video. I do talks, etc., because I feel obligated as an American to share these ideas and solutions, because we all, as American people, David, it's normal. It's human nature to talk negative and to complain, but we have to balance our life with ideas and solutions, just like saving and spending, just like technology and nature. You know, we've got to regain those 19th century skills, but dovetail them with 21st century technology.
Absolutely. And, you know, every step that somebody takes, if you grow a few of your vegetables even, at least those vegetables, you are going to get good, clean vegetables that are GMO, pesticide-free, anything that you can get in terms of eggs or hobby farm animals. If you can generate some of your power, that's at least something that you're moving towards a step of self-sufficiency. And I think the thing that really blocks so many people is they look at all these different aspects of it. They don't think about tackling them one at a time. They don't think about making incremental process. I think that they got to jump into it all at once, even in each individual area, that they've got to get complete energy self-sufficiency when they could just begin by adding a few solar power panels.
Absolutely. Look how many Americans who are listening to this right now, David, who feel like they're hamsters on a treadmill running to nowhere. I mean, look at the investment portfolio, the savings portfolio, the game plans of today's youth. They're really running out of options. They're running out of ideas. And I get asked often on radio shows or talks, what is the greatest demise for the middle class in America? And I definitely say that it's ignorance, apathy, and indifference. But what's really killing us, folks, is the fear of the consequences of being politically incorrect. In other words, the fear of telling the truth. We need to bring back the mentor-protege relationship. We need to talk to people who practice what they preach and actually do this, and not by some elite who's wearing a $5,000 suit on one of the big TV stations, which basically the old media, folks, is controlled by 6 corporations. 6. So just think how easy it is to change philosophies and ideologies.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the key things, Rich, is to think outside of the box. That's certainly something that you've done. That's something your book is very helpful about doing that. It's a very short book in terms of number of pages, but boy, it has a lot of information, just like your documentary does. I think it was very amusing for me to see how you used a cone to take out a turkey, to kill a traffic cone to take out a turkey. Everybody that saw the video here was remarking about that. So there's a lot of things like that that are in it that are very helpful tips. But I think the key thing is that we look at people who are afraid to try something different. They're afraid to take a different path. That's why so many people go to college, even though they're going to come out with a degree that doesn't necessarily help them get a job, and they're going to be enslaved with a debt that they can't even get rid of with bankruptcy. And that's, I think, one of the saddest things to see, how that kind of herd mentality is putting people into that system that is working against their freedom and independence.
Well, absolutely. I mean, aren't we tired of hearing race baiting questions, sex baiting, gender baiting? It's pretty obvious that they want to divide us into groups. All these politically correct buzzwords, David, like equality, fairness, tolerance, accountability, transparency, they're all virtual reality. They're an illusion. Let me just ask you, since you kind of dovetailed into economy a little bit, let me just ask you a quick scenario here, okay? Let's say you were my teacher, and you asked, and I was one of your students, and you asked the class 30 years ago, what would you be doing 30 years in the future to create a good economy and actually have the words middle class and prosperity discussed in the same sentence, which it's not anymore? And let's say I wrote this paper and I talked about the Federal Reserve printing money, buying back debt, the U.S. Treasury giving out IOUs. It's easier to get a job and keep a job and sue depending on what group you're in. Let's say I ran the economy on no savings and debt, and I talked about the wealth discrepancy that we have today. Let's say I eliminated most of the free markets and supply and demand, and I said that government workers weren't supposed to serve the people anymore, but now basically they're run by their own selfless ambition to use the people for their own benefit. Now, let's say I submitted that paper to you, David. What do you think you would give me if this happened 30 years ago and I submitted some of the ideas that I just shared with you now?
Well, I think you'd be a paranoid conspiracy theorist, you know, but all those things have happened in your lifetime and mine, haven't they, Rich?
That's right.
That's very true. But you have a great plan here. We're out of time. Thank you so much for talking to us. Your documentary, as well as your book, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, an excellent resource for people who want to get there and understand that they can do it one bit at a time. You overcame these odds, and hats off to you. You really have carved out a beautiful life for yourself against all the odds, Rich.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you having me on.
And again, I would stress, you don't have to do it all at once, and you don't even have to add an entire system at once. Take baby steps in one area and then baby steps in another. Everything that you can do to make yourself more self-sufficient enhances your life as well as your family's life. Rich's book is a great overview and gives you a great inspiration for why you need to do it and some steps on how to start with it. Well, that's it for tonight's news. If you're not a subscriber to our YouTube channel, please subscribe. If you're not a subscriber to Prison Planet TV, that will be one way for you to help support our operation. Plus, you can see it every weeknight as it happens, 7 Central. You can also pass that on to 20 other friends along with all of Alex Jones's documentaries. Well, join us again tomorrow night at 7 Central for the nightly news.
Infowars Life and InfowarsLife.com is extremely excited to announce our latest release, Winter Sun, a revolutionary type of vitamin D3. Winter Sun is a premium quality vitamin D3 nutritional supplement. It is produced by extracting oil from healthy, nutrient-dense plants known as lichens. Every batch is analyzed for purity and D3 content. It's completely free of toxins and allergens. Simply put, if you want the best at an extremely low price, this is it. Winter Sun is the result of our pursuit of the best source of vitamin D3. The research and development took over 2 years, but the result, as verified by independent laboratories, is the best vegan vitamin D3 product in the world. Read the facts at InfowarsLife.com about Winter Sun Vitamin D3. Not only does vitamin D3 promote a healthy mood, but vitamin D supports our memory and brain function, something the globalists are targeting. Visit Infowars.com today or call 888-253-3139.
You are watching the Infowars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfowarsNews.com. And your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.